8 weeks of chaos, my sister's vacation became my unexpected babysitting adventure. I never thought I'd be sharing this story on YouTube, confessing my sister-induced nightmares to the world, but what happened to me was so diabolically ridiculous that I feel compelled to tell it. Think of it as a cautionary tale about what can go wrong when your sister comes to visit. And I'm not just talking about the normal, loving kind of chaos. I'm talking about the kind that makes you wonder if you've ever actually considered calling the authorities to escort her off your couch. It started innocently enough. My sister, let's call her the human tornado, a whirlwind of chaos and mess, had announced that she was taking a break from her hectic city life and wanted to spend some quality time with me. Now, I'm the kind of person who thrives on peace and quiet, so at first, I thought this would be a lovely opportunity to reconnect and enjoy some quality time together. Little did I know that her idea of quality time would involve turning my house into a war zone and forcing me to think creatively about the concept of emotional labor. The first sign of trouble came when she arrived at my doorstep, flashy luggage in tow, tooting her own horn about how she'd just gotten a major promotion at work. Instantly, I could sense a hint of arrogance in her voice, a borderline entitlement that made me bristle. But I pushed the feeling aside, thinking that maybe she was just tired and overwhelmed, deserving of a break. Boy, did I underestimate the situation. Over the next few days, Her Royal Highness, the human tornado, would graciously bestow upon me a series of requests, each one more farcical than the last. Can you pick me up from the airport? Can you cook me breakfast? Can you do my laundry? One thing after another, each one shattering the delicate fabric of my carefully constructed adult life. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love my sister, but some days I question whether she's actually capable of operating a toaster without help. Now you might be thinking, what's the big deal? She's your sister. You help her out. But here's the thing. This isn't just about helping a sibling out. It's about becoming the unwitting auxiliary caregiver to a 30-something adult who refuses to learn the basics of life. It's about running around like a mad person, trying to keep up with her demands, all while silently seething about the crushing reality of having to manage someone else's expectations. As the days went by, I found myself tiptoeing through a minefield of chaos, wondering whether I'd be asked to perform my next duty, cooking her lunch, perhaps, or changing her bed towels for the 5th time that week. My friendship was reduced to a vicious tug-of-war between fights, demands, and sycophantic helping out, leaving me gasping for air in the social equivalent of a war zone. So you see, when I said that my sister's vacation changed my life, well, that's no understatement. Not in the way you might expect, perhaps, but trust me, this Titanic-sized meltdown will become clear as we continue down the chaotic rabbit hole that is my life with this self-proclaimed queen of mayhem. Buckle up, folks. It's about to get real. Growing up, I always thought I was living with a unicorn, a supermodel in a mermaid swimsuit, or a princess with a tiara that never fell off. But what I really had was a sister who thought the world revolved around her. I mean, who needs sunscreen when you can turn your skin a lovely shade of lobster, right? I remember this one time I got diagnosed with mono. Yes, that mythical illness where you're too tired to move and you can only eat oranges for a week. My mom, being the good parent, made sure I got plenty of rest. Or so I thought. While I was lying on the couch, my sister, Sarah, convinced our mom to let her throw a birthday party for her hamster, Mr. Whiskers, who gets to have 2 birthday parties in 1 week, clearly my sister. And then there was the time she managed to accidentally glue her shoes to the floor during a school presentation. I still don't know how she managed to do that, but I'm pretty sure it was an Oscar-worthy performance. Of course, our mom just laughed it off and said, Sarah's just having a creative moment. But in all seriousness, growing up with Sarah was a fascinating experience. It was like living with a walking, talking fashion disaster. She'd wear neon green mascara with plaid pants and think she looked on trend. My mom would just nod and say, "That's just Sally's style." Yeah, Sally's style was going straight to therapy. I honestly thought that was just the extent of her quirks, until last summer when my entire world changed. My sister's sense of entitlement turned into a toxic superpower, and I got to be the human-sized punching bag. I mean, Who needs a trampoline when you have a family dynamic like ours? Growing up, I lived in a peculiar household where competition was a daily occurrence, and the stakes were high. My sister Sarah and I were always in a battle to outdo each other. Not because we wanted to, but because our mother made us feel like we were in a never-ending Olympics. Every small achievement, no matter how insignificant, was magnified and scrutinized. It was like our mother had a timer counting down to the ultimate showdown. On the surface, everything seemed normal. We had a beautiful home, 2 loving parents, and a seemingly idyllic life. But scratch the surface and you'd find a different story. A story of constant comparison, where every action, every decision, and every accomplishment was measured against each other. It was a fight for attention, for validation, and for the subtle yet precious green stamps of approval. Sarah was always the favorite. Her imperfections were celebrated as unique qualities, while mine were ruthlessly criticized as mistakes. If she brought home a B on her math test, it was like she'd acquired a new Olympic gold medal. Meanwhile, my straight A-pluses barely earned a glance from our mother, as if they were too ordinary to merit attention. It was like I was wearing a pair of invisible glasses, and everything I did was seen through a distorted lens. The battle for attention extended far beyond our schoolwork. Our mother had this amazing gift of making the mundane seem like a crisis. If I spilled a glass of water, it was a catastrophe that could have ignited a world war. If Sarah lost her favorite toy, it was like the entire world had come to an end. The pressure was always on, and it was like living in a constant state of emergency. But the most devastating part of all this was how Sarah often got away with the most inexplicable behavior, like the time she broke my favorite game console. I was devastated. But what did our mother say? Oh, accidents happen. Meanwhile, if I accidentally stepped on my toy car by mistake, I was in grave trouble. The playing field was never level. But one incident stands out in my mind, like a beacon of madness. When I was just 12 years old, Sarah had the audacity to take my birthday money, a whopping $50 that my grandmother had lovingly sent me, and squander it all on candy. When I revealed the truth to our mother, her response will forever be seared in my mind. Well, you should have hidden it better. That was the day I realized I was living in Alice in Wonderland. As I grew older, the competition never stopped. But I began to see through the facade, to understand that I wasn't just competing against Sarah, but also against the pressure to be perfect that loomed over our household. In hindsight, it's amusing to think about all the ridiculous fights we had, all the false starts and finish lines. But beneath the surface, there was a painful truth that would haunt me for years to come. That sometimes the ones we love the most are also the ones who hurt us the deepest. As we grew older, my sister's sense of entitlement only got worse. I'm not sure if it was a result of being the favorite child or if she just got better at pulling it off, but either way, it was like she had a personal cart to which she'd add anything she deemed desirable, including my clothes, accessories, and even my late-night pizza. I remember one time she borrowed my favorite concert t-shirt without asking and somehow managed to stain it with grass juice at home. Our mother took one look at it and said, "Oh well, I guess it's just a little well-traveled now." I was left wondering if she was serious about the whole well-traveled thing or if she was just making excuses. And don't even get me started on my car. She'd use it without permission, like it was her own personal limousine service. I'd come back to find empty tanks, squashed dashboard air fresheners, and the occasional overly enthusiastic oil spill. I swear, she had a PhD in gas guzzling 101. Our mom would just shrug it off, saying, "That's just how she is." Like, I get it. My sister's a free spirit, a female version of Indiana Jones, with a penchant for high-end dining and no regard for credit card limits. But the real kicker? She never faced any consequences. No timeouts rounding, no actual punishment for her extensive list of transgressions. It was as if her sense of entitlement came with a built-in force field of excuses. Our mother would just say, "You need to be more understanding." Like I was supposed to be some sort of family therapist on the side, when in reality, all I wanted was my things back and a shred of accountability for her actions. If I'm being totally honest, it was also kind of fun watching her take advantage of our mom's indulgence, like her was some kind of Russian oligarch in a free-for-all soap opera. I'd just sit there, enjoying the train wreck that was our family dynamics, and say to myself, okay, Sarah, you got this. Take your best shot. Ruin the clothes, hog the credit cards, and weep about your crushed innocence when the bills come due. But all jokes aside, it was exhausting being her personal enabler, just so our mom could avoid a confrontation. Sometimes I genuinely wondered if I was the one with the problem, like I was some sort of hypersensitive robot, constantly getting in the way of her grand adventure. Alas, looking back, I realized that was just a small part of the whole entitlement circus. There was more to come, much more. Like the summer that turned into a chaotic nightmare with the arrival of a certain sugar daddy Mark and two unwitting, unwilling participants, Tommy and Jake. I'll never forget the day my brother-in-law, don't get me wrong, Tommy and Jake aren't exactly the guys from which I want to receive Christmas gifts, showed up at my doorstep. It was a warm June day when Sarah decided she wasn't going to bother dropping them off anywhere near me. I got the whole package deal. 2 little bundles of joy, or so they call them. I was still sipping on my lukewarm coffee, preoccupied with some crucial work tasks on my laptop, when I noticed Sarah slowly dragging her way up the stairs to my front door. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but oh, the naivety that comes with daydreaming of work milestones. As she made her way into my apartment, I didn't even notice the bags piling up behind her until they rolled on the floor. Packed already, I see, I thought to myself when suddenly it hit me, the realization that nothing could stop her anymore. The bags looked a lot bigger than I remembered, and their boys did too, big, active, and impatient to play video games. And that, right there, triggered all sorts of catastrophics to unfold in my fragile head. "They're your problem now," she calmly chimed, pretending she was buying back a library membership and having to return the borrowed books a couple of days early. Before I could even wrap my head around the absurdity of her statement, Sarah and her loaded purse were already heading out the door. An inexplicable urge to exclaim, late return fees would not deter her that much. I kept it inside, instead grumbling to myself. My very rational and all-knowing inner voice whispered those words, must remain composed. Little did my inner calm know exactly what was coming, after such a chilling message of parting, carefree and light-hearted by the way, not caring who or how things look on that point. As she closed the door behind her, a wave of feelings ran through my body. I hadn't spent the last 8 long weeks avoiding anything, like holidays during college, but a thought ran through my brain like a twisted, morbid joke. I think I'm well prepared to start a babysitting business anytime. The idea was haunting, but made sense at the very same time. What did I know about parenting anyway? When I called our mother in a full-blown panic, I was expecting some version of, "Oh my God, what happened? Let me get over there right away." But nope. My mother, the queen of motherly responses, delivered a real doozy. "Just take care of the boys. You know how Sarah needs her me time." At first, I thought to myself, Sarah needs her me time? Because, taking 2 babies from a 12-year-old and abandoning them on my doorstep isn't a 24/7 job or anything. But as I hung up the phone and started freaking out, because, let's be real, 2 babies, that line just kept echoing in my head. She needs her me time. I mean, who needs me time that badly when they have 2 adorable babies to take care of? It's not like I had a social life or a job to worry about. Oh wait, I did. But Sarah's me time was apparently more important than either of those things combined. Meanwhile, I'm over here thinking, did she seriously just say that? Is she for real? I swear, it's like she thought I was a magician or something, and that I could just conjure up diaper changes, midnight feedings, and tantrums out of thin air with a sprinkle of fairy dust. But what really took the cake was when I pointed out to her that 8 weeks of me time was a pretty long commitment, considering I wasn't exactly rolling in excess funds or entitled to a taxpayer-funded childcare program. Her response? Oh, just shrug and say, well, you should have been more careful about your family dynamics. So essentially, it's my fault that my sister's me time was so important that she had to abandon her 2 babies for 2 whole months. Because, clearly, I had some kind of family dynamics, insurance that I was supposed to cash in on before she took off. Where do I even begin? I guess it all started when Sarah came marching back with Marcus, who looked like a reject from a bad action movie. I was trying to enjoy a peaceful evening, but little did I know I was about to get a front row seat to a real-life drama. Things got ugly when I refused to let them in, and by ugly, I mean epic. Sarah started screaming at me, accusing me of being a heartless monster and a sociopathic, emotionally abusive, toxic individual. Yep, that's a verbatim quote. Meanwhile, Marcus decided it would be a great idea to try and force his way into my house. I mean, who needs a key when you've got brute strength, right? That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands, or rather, my own phone. I called 911 immediately, mainly because I wanted to see how they'd respond to a high-stakes, high-drama situation like this. I mean, it's not every day you get to say, "Hey, I've got a crazed ex-relative trying to break into my house. Can you send someone over ASAP?" As I waited for the cavalry to arrive, I watched in awe as Marcus attempted to break down my door without actually breaking down the door. More like, he just kind of stood there, face-palmingly flailing his arms like a try-hard Terminator. It was almost amusing. And then there's the bonus edition of Sarah's performance. I mean, the woman is either a genius or a lunatic, maybe a little bit of both. As the police arrived, she screeched threats about ruining my life and making sure I regret the day I ever said no to your visits. It was like watching a dramatic reading of Twilight on acid, minus the coherent plot, of course. The looks on the officers' faces were priceless, by the way. They looked at Sarah like she was speaking in tongues, and at Marcus like they'd just been propositioned for a ride-sharing gig. I swear, that scene was perfect material for a superhero movie. Cops bumbling around while dealing with crazy relative duo, trying to tame a furious ex-vacation extra, and saving the day in 12 minutes or less. Needless to say, the police promptly arrested Marcus and stepped in to defuse the situation. Sarah, on the other hand, kept ranting and raving like fine, I'll say it, lunatic until the officers politely escorted her out of the scene, wondering how this whole mess started. Well, I'm not one to gossip, but let me tell you, it took CPS a whole 3 days to show up at my doorstep, aka the babysitting headquarters. Meanwhile, I was busy juggling tantrums, missed nap times, and the utter mess that is a 3-year-old's toy collection. I swear, I was starting to think that my living room was actually a dumping ground for every single toy from the toy box next door. At this point, I was convinced I had single-handedly funded the toy industry. My sanity was hanging by a thread, or in this case, a single strand of my hair. The social workers showed up, and I stood proudly next to my tiny terrors, ready to defend my dubious parenting skills. They looked relieved, which I'm pretty sure was my cue to freak out. I'm sure they were just glad to see someone who wasn't quite as certifiably insane as Sarah. And by someone who wasn't quite as certifiable insane as Sarah, I mean myself. Because let's be real, I had a full-on meltdown in the bathroom and had to be talked down by my 3-year-old. The official diagnosis was chronic babysitter, which I'm pretty sure is a real thing. They asked me a million questions. How long had Sarah been neglecting the boys? How did I find out? Did I report it? And I'm pretty sure I heard them mutter something under their breath about sugar daddy drama. It was one of those moments where I just wanted to scream, "Yeah, you have no idea." I managed to contain myself, however, and regaled them with stories of the time the twins wore matching Superman suits to Halloween and refused to take them off. And the one where the 3-year-old spit his entire bowl of lasagna across the room because I asked him to eat it slowly. To their credit, they looked relieved when I finished talking, and mostly, if not totally, regained their composure. As they packed up their bags and prepared to whisk Sarah away, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held for this little family of mine. Would they make some new, marginally competent parent? Would I finally get to put my feet up and enjoy a nice glass of wine without interruption? I guess only time, and probably Google, would tell. As I sat at my kitchen table staring blankly at the stack of paperwork in front of me, I thought to myself, what have I gotten myself into? It all started when my sister's vacation turned into my unexpected babysitting adventure. With no notice, 2 adorable bundles of energy had dropped into my life, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to be their superhero. But as the days turned into weeks, I fell head over heels in love with these little rascals. They were always getting into mischief, testing my patience, and pushing me to my limits. But then came the unthinkable. I made the hardest decision of my life. I filed for custody of the boys. It wasn't an easy choice, but I knew it was necessary to give them the stability and love they deserved. As fate would have it, their birth father's family came out of nowhere, dusting off those cobwebs after years of no contact. I suppose they thought they could swoop in and claim the boys, leaving me in the dust. Not on my watch. It was like they thought they could just waltz in here and steal my throne. Not that I had any intention of being royalty, but you get the idea. These folks were like a tornado, unpredictable, chaotic, and a bit crazier than I thought possible. They showed up at the most unexpected times, spewing out a laundry list of demands and rights that I was suddenly responsible for. It was like they thought they were the stars of their very own soap opera, and I was just merely a guest star mistaken for the leading lady. But amidst all the chaos, I knew I had to hold my ground. I couldn't let them bully me or manipulate the system to get what they wanted. I took a deep breath, put my game face on, and began the arduous journey of fighting for the boys' well-being. It was a battle, no doubt about it. With each passing day, I felt like I was rappelling down the Grand Canyon with a bunch of monkeys wielding banana peels. But I refused to give up. I was the unyielding champion of solo parenting, armed with nothing but my wits, a spreadsheet, and a strong cup of coffee. And as the weeks went by, the court scheduled hearing after hearing, and the birth family's antics grew more and more absurd, I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Who would have thought that custody battles could become the next big thing in reality TV? The realities of divorce and heartache, a soap opera unfolds. It was then and there that I realized the boys were more than just a custody case. They were my little miracles who had brought a sense of purpose into my life. And for that, I was willing to fight tooth and nail to give them the best possible life. The trial was exactly what you'd imagine. Chaos, drama, and more than a few awkward stares from the judge. I mean, who brings a live piano player to a courtroom, am I right? Sarah did, and it only added to the theatrics. I remember walking into the courtroom feeling like I was about to get lectured on proper latte art. The judge, Judge Thompson, was an imposing figure with a stern expression that could curdle milk at 50 paces. He gave us a withering look and said, "All right, let's get this over with." First up, the opposition's attorney, Ms. Lee, tried to paint Sarah as the most unlikely of victims, the epitome of motherhood. She presented a series of pictures showing Sarah with the boys, smiling and happy, like a commercial for some crappy brand of diapers. The jury looked convinced, until the prosecution expertly countered with a montage of 50 memes ridiculing Sarah's parenting skills. Meanwhile, Sarah displayed a flawless combination of shock, outrage, and utter entitlement. She cried, she sobbed, she stomped her feet like a spoiled 2-year-old. I genuinely thought I heard her demand, "I want a cookie," at one point. Her sugar daddy, Marcus, lurked in the back, scratching his head, probably wondering what he got himself into. The pièce de résistance, though, was when Sarah's mother, our mummy, took the stand. She claimed that she'd been so traumatized by our family dynamics growing up. Spoiler, it was mostly Sarah being a diva. That she'd been living in permanent trauma-induced dread. The jury seemed suspicious, but our mummy assured them that her PTSD symptoms were genuine, and that's why she'd lied about Sarah's parenting skills for years. Sure, because no one gets PTSD from overindulging a toddler. It was during this mummy testimony that I spotted Sarah exchanging pleading glances with Marcus. I half expect them to write a unified memoir titled The Tale of the Tolerated. In conclusion, at this point, Judge Thompson looked almost sad. The prosecution presented conclusive evidence of Sarah's role in Tommy and Jake's neglect and her flagrant attempt to abandon them with Marcus. It dawned on me that Sarah's vacuous, airheaded expression had been nothing more than an elaborate bait-and-switch technique designed to distract from her very real dereliction of duty. It was almost anticlimactic when the judge handed down Sarah's sentence, 18 months in prison for child endangerment and the aforementioned assault attempt. As we walked out of the courtroom, I caught Sarah's envious gaze. It seemed like she envied our shared reality, the verdict, and the knowledge that she was going down for real. I couldn't help but chuckle to myself. If anyone had told me I'd be the rock supporting not just two boys, but also two societal casualties, I'd have played the lotto. As I sit here thinking about my life, I realize that it's been a wild ride full of ups and downs. But honestly, I wouldn't change a thing, especially not the part where I got to gain two gorgeous boys who keep me on my toes. Tommy and Jake are their names, and they're the light of my life. At first, I thought I was just babysitting them for a few weeks, but little did I know that I'd end up adopting them full-time. It was a bit of a shock to my system, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. They're my instant family, and I'm so grateful to have them by my side. When people ask me about the experience, I tell them it was a surreal adventure. I mean, who would have thought that I'd end up living with two boys who were basically stray cats at the time? But as it turns out, they were just mischievous and needed a bit of guidance. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. There are days when I feel like I'm playing referee to the world's most spirited debate. But with patience and love, we've managed to create a domestic harmony that even the most seasoned parents would envy. Looking back, I realize that my life took a dramatic turn because of my sister's judgmental nature. We're from a family where expectations were high, and if you didn't meet them, you were basically an outcast. But I refused to play by those rules and decided to forge my own path. And that's exactly what I did. By setting boundaries and standing up for what I believed in, I managed to create a space for independence and self-love. And it didn't take long to discover that I was meant to have kids of my own. Or, in this case, two gorgeous boys who were just waiting for a loving home. The beauty of it all is that I got to start fresh and create my own family. Tommy and Jake needed someone to love them unconditionally, and I got the chance to do just that. And now, we're a happy little family living life to the fullest.